Hello and welcome back to Radical Disruption, or welcome to Radical Disruption if this is your first time here. Either way, I'm so glad that you're here. The first thing that I want to say right off the bat, though, is if you haven't listened to the last episode, the one that's prior to this, go and listen to that first before you listen to this one, because it's a part two to my summit cancellation episode. This one is. And so it'll make more sense and it'll give you more context if you listen to that one first and then you listen to this one. The next thing I want to say is the title of this episode. It's called I Hit Rock Bottom. I know it sounds dramatic. It's just genuinely how I felt at the time. I never understood what that saying meant until this situation, until I experienced what I experienced. And so now I understand the depths of the saying I hit rock bottom. So I know it sounds dramatic, but it's genuinely, I feel like it's the perfect title for this episode. Now, I'm going to do my best in this episode to convey feelings, but also to pull out lessons. It's been really, really hard for me to put into words how I've felt, just everything that I've experienced this year, but especially for this episode, because I thought that what I was feeling in terms of before and also in the process of canceling Summit, I thought that those feelings were deep, but this one, these were depths that I didn't even know that I could feel or that I would ever feel. And so it has been hard to pull out lessons here. But again, this is something that I think that it's really important to talk about. So I'm going to do my best. So bear with me. Let's, I guess, I was going to say fast forward, but let's backtrack here. What is that? Rewind. That's the word I'm looking for. Let's rewind a bit to this moment where it all started. So I remember talking to Gabe one night, and this was after I had canceled Summit. And when I had canceled Summit, I knew that there was going to be a weight lifted off my shoulders, but I didn't understand how much would be lifted off my shoulders. And when people say that they feel like there's an elephant that's like standing on their chest and there's that like immense weight, that's how I felt. And then I canceled Summit and it was like the elephant had stepped off my chest and it was like light and airy and I felt so free. And I was like, this next month in my business is going to be amazing and everything's going to go back to normal and everything's going to be light and happy and I'm not going to have any problems anymore. And like, everything's going to be good because I canceled Summit. And here I am laying in bed one night with my husband and I'm talking to him and he had just asked how my month had been in business. And I remember telling him that I made negative money that month. And also, disclaimer, might have some tears here. So if you're listening, if you hear me choking up a little bit, or if my voice gets a little whatever, that's why. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see. But I told him I had made negative money that month. And that was after having $50,000 cash months consecutively for 2 years. Yes, you heard me right. For 2 years straight, not dropping below that number. And actually, last year, I was averaging $75,000 months. And then here I was. And this wasn't because I was being wild and buying crazy things or doing crazy things. None of that was the case. And it wasn't because of rash decisions, nothing like that. But I remember telling him that I was so angry at myself and I was so disappointed that I had gotten to this point. And it was just, again, it felt that elephant just stepped back on my chest and there was just this weight, but it was a different weight. It was a heavier weight. It was a darker feeling. And we were fine. We were fine financially. We had savings. Everything was fine. But to say that seeing a negative month in my income, to say that didn't sting would be a huge, huge, huge lie. It was really hard and it hit me really, really, really hard. And I remember talking to Gabe about it and he told me, perfect guy response. He said, it'll be okay. You'll figure it out. Which is true, which is 100% true. But as a woman, that's not what I want to hear right now. And I remember after he said that, I just remember thinking to myself, but what if I don't? But what if I don't figure it out? I'm the sole income provider. I have a family to provide for. I have a daughter now. It's not just me and my husband. And then, of course, ensued a spiral. And I'm not just talking like a spiral that's 5 minutes and then you go to bed and you wake up and like you're totally fine. I'm talking one that took me several weeks to navigate, to get out of, because that spiral was so deep and it just kept pulling me down and down and down and down. And I spent so many days crying in my office, and then having to pull it together to walk downstairs, to be a mom and to be a wife and to do all the other roles that I have to do. And I had so many moments just sitting up there in my office where I felt like my failures had discredited me. Like, who wants to hire a business coach who has made negative money 1 month and an Instagram expert who hasn't grown in a year? And there was just this voice in my head telling me to just throw in the cards, and because I wasn't good enough and that no one would listen to me. And it was, that voice was so loud. It was like someone literally had a megaphone in my ear telling me, you're not good enough. You're not going to make it. You can't do this. And it was something that I had never experienced in my business journey. And I've been really, really lucky to have support since day one of my business. My husband is literally my biggest fan with his foam finger and just like waving it around. Like, he was the one that told me to just go for it and start the business. And my family, everyone has been so supportive. And so I've never really had any pushback. And to have this pushback come from within me, and being like, I would consider myself a very strong person. I was like, what is going on? And I was also so afraid that it was all going to go away. That everything that I had put my blood, sweat, and tears into growing, that it was just going to disappear overnight. And my head was in a really dark place for a few weeks, not just because of the money, but because of everything that was going on in life. And it led me to a place where I was really afraid to dream for a while. And I still am, honestly. Just to give an example, and I know this is going to sound funny, but this is like the best way that I can explain it. So in the last episode, I talked about how we had found our dream property and we tried to go under contract and it didn't end up working out. Well, I was always someone who was like looking on Zillow and, oh, this is where we're going to live, or this is the land that we're going to buy. And it got to the point where I deleted Zillow and I deleted everything that was me dreaming, basically. And it took me 2 months to re-download Zillow because I was afraid to dream. I was afraid to look at those properties because deep down, like, a part of me was like, you will never have that. You're never going to be able to achieve that because you're a failure and you're not enough. And so it was really hard there for a while because as an entrepreneur, you have to be a dreamer, right? And so I'm sitting here, this was a few months ago, thinking about Black Friday, and I'm like, I hope I make $100 for Black Friday. Whereas the prior year, I was aiming for $200,000 for 1 month. And it was really, really hard. And it's taken me a long time. But the good thing about rock bottom is that there's only one way left to go, and that is up. And so I spent the last 2 months now digging myself out of rock bottom, and I want to share a few things that have been really, really helpful for me in terms of business. And so there's 4 things here. Number 1 is strict social media boundaries. And there's a lot of things that I can take from a lot of the experiences that I've had, but the number 1 thing that I think is so powerful for any entrepreneur to have as a skill is awareness. And just being aware of anything, aware of your feelings, aware of experiences, aware of the people that are surrounding you, aware of the content that you're putting, just awareness in general. And so after a few weeks of doom scrolling, where I would just feel like absolute trash after hopping off of Instagram, I took a step back and I was like, something needs to change here. And so I set strict social media boundaries, which at the time I thought it was 1 hour, but it actually ended up being 30 minutes. So I thought I had set a 1 hour time limit so I can only be on Instagram for 1 hour. But I was looking the other day because I was trying to figure out I was trying to take a screenshot of like how much time I had spent on Instagram. I was going to use it for an Instagram post. And I looked and I was like, wait a second, this is only set for 30 minutes. And so I was actually spending half the amount of time that I thought that I was spending on Instagram each day. But I set that boundary of 30 minutes. And what that does, and I know that 30 minutes probably sounds like a lot for most of you who are listening, but go look at how much time you spend on Instagram or any just social media in general. Add it all up and you'll realize how quickly like 30 minutes is actually a really small amount of time, especially if you're building your business from social media. And so I had to be really intentional with the time that I was spending on Instagram. I had to post and respond and interact with my community and post on stories. Like I had 30 minutes to do so. And some days, of course, it doesn't happen in 30 minutes. I'm going to be quite honest with you because I'm not a perfect human being. Sometimes I have to extend my time limit a little bit. But I would say majority of the days I do hit that because I am very intentional. And because I also set another boundary for myself, which started as a 7-day challenge, but I actually just continue doing it because it's been so good for my mental health, which is no consuming. And so the doom scroll, obviously I'm consuming content on Instagram. I'm seeing all these people who are successful. I'm thinking to myself, I'm never going to be successful. Like good for them, but that can never be me. That was like my thoughts. And so I was like, I have to stop. I have to stop consuming content. I obviously need social media for my business to continue to grow though. And so I was like, how can I, be on this toxic place without it being toxic? And so that's something that I have done for myself. Do I think that that's going to be forever that I do that? No, definitely not the case. But for right now, it's been really, really good for me to not do any consuming and to have very strict social media time limits there because it keeps me really intentional. So that's the first thing there. And that's, of course, helped with comparison a lot. And that's where a lot of negative thoughts were coming up like on a day-to-day basis was just that comparison there. And it's helped me to just stay in my lane and focus on my journey and my expertise and all that. Number 2 is a huge emphasis on income producing activities. And so I strayed away from my income producing activities and I actually have another podcast episode that dives into IPAs. So if you want to go look at that, you can look for it. I don't remember exactly what the title is, but you'll see IPA in the title. Go listen to that. It's a really good episode. Actually one of the most downloaded episodes on the podcast. So very, very good. But I strayed away from that when I was focused on, and then of course focused on selling and then focused on canceling the summit. And I didn't really get back to it in that first month after I'd canceled summit because I was just trying to figure things out. I was just trying to recover. And I just thought, honestly, that like my business would just go back to normal, which is very naive of me. And so I wasn't focused on income producing activities, specifically selling daily and driving traffic to my funnels, which also will help to sell my offers. And so I had to take that step back and be like, okay, I just had the lowest month that I've ever had in my business. So obviously something needs to change here. And how can I get back to this place of having these $50,000 months? Well, I need to focus on the things that are actually driving the needle the most in my business. Again, it sounds so simple, but it's one of those things that not only have I seen in my own business, obviously, but I see so often in other people's businesses is they're not focused on the things that are actually moving the needle. They're just adding a lot of fluff. And so huge emphasis on income producing activities, which also goes along really well with number 1, which I just talked about, which is strict social media boundaries, because I have a very limited time that I'm spending on social media. So it has to be really intentional. And so I want to be intentional with the things that are actually moving the needle in my business. And also too, I wanted to reaffirm to myself that I could do it, that I can make sales. And what a better way to make sales than to do things that are actually going to make you sales in your business. And so I knew that because my mindset was so down in the dumps, it was literally at rock bottom, that I needed to prove to myself, that I needed to reinforce the belief that I could make money. And so how can I do that? It's by doing the things that can make me money and then seeing that money come through, which is only going to build on that belief, which leads me into number 3, which is daily mindset work. And I'm not talking like basic mindset work of like, I listen to a podcast and I'm set for the day. Nothing wrong with podcasts. Obviously, I love podcasts and that can definitely help for mindset work, but I'm talking like crazy mindset work. And this is something that I had never done at any other time in my journey until this point. I had heard people talk about journaling. I had heard people talk about, what am I trying to say? Breath work and like meditation practices as like mindset. I had heard people talk about it. And I was like, I don't need that. I was more of like that podcast girly where I'd plug into a podcast and be like, oh, great, my mindset work is done, which works. And it works in different seasons for sure. And it works for me up until this point in my business where I got to the point where I needed more. I needed to do more because my mindset was just so off track that a podcast a day was not going to get me back on track. And here's the thing, you can't make money when you don't believe that you can make money. And that's why people say you can't strategize your way to success. You have to have mindset. Like 80% of success is mindset, 20% is strategy. And it's because of that, because you can only achieve what you believe that you can achieve. So here I am thinking, I can't make money. I'm never going to be successful. Well, your thoughts create your actions and your actions create your reality. So I knew that I could not keep going down that road if I wanted to create a different reality, right? I could keep going down that road if I wanted my reality to be that I actually wasn't ever going to make money again, right? And so I knew that I had to shift my thoughts because my thoughts were affecting my actions and my actions were going to affect my reality. And so that led me to recognize, well, that led me to a lot of different things, but specifically journal prompts. And I actually pulled up a few journal prompts that I found really, really helpful. There was a lot of journal prompts that I went through, but these were a few that I found really, really, really helpful in just like in the mindset work. So I'm just going to read these. Again, if you're like, this is not for me, go into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT for journal prompts on a specific topic. Great resource. That's actually where all these prompts came from. And so the first one that I found really helpful was, what evidence do I have that supports the belief that I'll never make money again? Is there a possibility that this belief isn't fully accurate? And so diving into that. And then let's see, what was the other one? If I could look at this challenge from an outside perspective, what alternative ways could I see it? That was another one, just like removing myself from the situation or trying to remove myself from the situation and seeing it from almost like a bigger perspective looking in. You could also ask that question to someone else as well and get their perspective on it too. What accomplishments have I achieved in my business, no matter how small, that I'm proud of? So really looking at the journey that I've had in my business, and already, obviously I have had a massively successful journey. And so really looking at that and reminding myself of the things that I have achieved was really, really helpful. And then what else? Let's see here. What are the specific thoughts or fears coming up when I think about my business and making money? That one was really, really helpful and just diving deep into that. And I'm not talking like surface level of one sentence answer. I'm talking like pages of journaling. And again, that's just how I approached it. Of course, you can approach it however you feel is beneficial. And then the next question, or last question that I would say here, is, what do I feel these beliefs may have originated from? And are there past experiences or influences contributing to this feeling? And are there past experiences or influences that will help, that are opposite of what I'm feeling? So basically, again, just reinforcing that belief that I've done it, that I've had success in the past, I've had sales come in the past, and reminding myself of that. So these are just some, like, I guess, things that I recognize. So recognizing that my value and my worth to my audience isn't determined by how much money that I make monthly. And I know that might not relate to every single person who's listening to this, but really thinking about, what are you attaching your value and your worth to in terms of like how your audience sees you? For you, it might not be money. For you, maybe it's that you put out X amount of free content. For you, maybe it's, whatever it is, like how or are you attaching your value and worth to something that it shouldn't be attached to? And for me, I was 100% attaching my value and my worth to my audience based off of how much money I make monthly. And that is not why people in my audience are around me. They're not like, oh, unless Maya makes $50,000 a month, I'm out. That's not at all what they're thinking. The next thing that I recognize is that my struggles, they don't define me, they refine me. Let me repeat that. My struggles don't define me, they refine me, and they allow me to better connect with my audience. I also recognize that money comes and goes, and I've made it once, so I can make it again, and really looking at my business as evidence as what's possible versus as being a disappointment and downfall just because I had one bad month or a few bad months. And then recognizing that I've been feeling misaligned in the way that I show up with my content and just in my business in general. And that if I change that, I can attract more of my dream clients, which is going to lead to sales, which is going to lead to income. And a little reminder to myself that failures are a part of success, and that after every down, there is an up, and the downs make you grateful for your ups. So that was the mindset work section, which kind of leads me into the fourth and last thing here that I've done to really just climb myself out of that rock bottom, which is filling my cup daily and really taking care of myself. And this is in and out of my business. And so one big thing is really having strict time frames with when I'm clocking out of my business. So I'm not working, I don't even want to say I don't work, I definitely don't work 24/7, but after like dinner time or after I clock out, I have dinner with my family, and like I don't want to have to be working during that time period. And so that's part of taking care of myself, is having those boundaries of like separation from my business, but also taking care of myself in the sense of doing the things that do fill my cup. And that's going to obviously be different from me than it is for you. But, going on walks and spending time with Remy and, getting out of the house, that's another thing that's really important for me as well, just my mental health in general. So all of those things are, again, I guess there's not just one thing, all those things in a bundle, plus a few other things that I didn't mention as well, have really helped me to get into a better mindset. And I want you to know that you are experiencing low income month, or your mindset isn't where you want it to be. You can work on it. And I just want you to know that your thoughts do affect your actions, and your actions do affect your reality. And so you want to make sure that what you're thinking and the actions that you're taking are in alignment with the goals that you have. And I know that you know that, but this is just that moment to take a step back and to make sure that you are that is the case for you, right? And so if you're like, hey, I want to make X amount of money, I want to grow X amount of followers, I want to do X thing, I want make sure that the actions that you're taking and the thoughts that you are thinking are going to help you to get to that point. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and I'll see you in part 3 of the Not series of pulling back the curtain on all the things that have been happening this year in my business.